So this is a kind of special episode because it's us starting to tell our story as people as well. So today's your turn, Sam.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is it that you kind of wanted to share about yourself and that
Yeah.
feels like a seminal part of like who you are?
Well, I guess one of my key identities is wrapped around my motherhood and what that means to me and how long I have been mothering for, like coming up 35 years. Like my oldest child is 34, soon to be 35. And yeah, I was really young when I had him, 17. And then 40 and 46 when I had my second and third children. And just the experience has been so different for me, 17 versus in your 40s, and 17 not necessarily emotionally and definitely not financially equipped to bring another life into the world. And then coming from the north of Scotland, I didn't realize it at the time because of my naivety and being so young, that the discrimination that I had experienced, I can only see that in hindsight now. Down to the fact, even, in the north of Scotland, which was run by the Presbyterian Church, it was very taboo in 1990 and before, to have children outside of wedlock or outside of relationship. And so I was encouraged to adopt my child, and I knew that that was just not an option for me. And
Wow.
I was very fortunate to, have the support of my mum, who was also very young, and my sister, who was only 13 at the time. And so they were integral in helping me and supporting me in raising this child on my own. Yeah, it's been a really interesting experience that I noticed when I then was 40, when I had my middle child, and the different experience of antenatal care and postnatal care, and that just wasn't offered to me as a teenage mum,
Yeah.
So it
was
was
like more winging it kind of thing.
yeah, absolutely. And no surprises that I did get postnatal depression, as such a young person, and being on my own, raising this child, and, the experience of that was also really interesting to look back on. And then having my children at the other side of the world, away from family support for my second and third child, and again got postnatal depression. So I've had postnatal depression with all my children, and so when you look at what the risk factors for postnatal depression, like I've been in the high risk factor for all three. So that's really shaped who I am, and I think that's really driven me to my own learnings. It's almost, I've carved this life where it's almost been like trying to recognize and understand my own experience. And so I got into naturopathy because of that, psychotherapy because of that. So yeah, I've kind of designed my life around my own experience, and the hunger to understand myself.
I'm curious, when you were talking about like having all the sort of components in place for postnatal depression, and that obviously, that thirst to understand a little bit more of that later on, that might have been informed by these experiences. What did you notice were the commonalities of what caused that to happen for you?
So one of the key things, I think, is the isolation. So being young at 17, having a child, he's in bed at night, you don't have a support structure, you're not in a stable relationship or any relationship, and it's just you and a little person. That's a really good recipe for feeling flat and low in the world. And so whilst I had my mum and my sister, through the daytime. It was the nighttime that just felt like it was just a very, like I was, it was, the clock just ticked a lot slower. So it felt really lonely and isolating.
Mm,
That was the same experience that I had here in New Zealand, where I didn't have any family around me.
mm,
And again, didn't have that support structure. Yes, I had John, my husband, this time, so that was a different experience. But children are supposed to be raised by a village, and I didn't have a village around me, and so
mm.
that was a common denominator there as well. Yeah, yeah.
So isolation, were there any other kind of factors that contributed to
Sleep
sort of,
deprivation is a big thing.
yeah,
Mass. Um,
yeah.
and with all my babies, I went through this phase, I guess, combated by sleep deprivation, where I got anxious about them falling asleep in case of cot death. So then that became my thing, where I kind of fixated on that. So I wouldn't sleep, and so that was another factor, is just the sleep deprivation that you have. Like
Mm,
it's not for the faint-hearted, you know. You might be operating on 2 hours of sleep a day if you're lucky sometimes, depending on what type of child you have. So that
yeah.
was another factor. And then when you get depressed, you don't tend to even want to go out or be with other people. I've never been one to join coffee groups or, mother-child groups. I've never been that kind of person, and so that wasn't something I was ever interested in. So again, it was that isolation that you can experience. Yeah.
And I can imagine like being 17, being pregnant, the kind of stigma and stuff associated with that, like the world that you gave birth into is very different to the world today that is quite open to that sort of stuff. So it must have felt not just isolating, but also kind of stigmatizing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There was definitely that, particularly in the north of Scotland, where the church ran the city of Inverness. Yeah, and we were coming out of the dark ages, if you like, where, not even in places like Ireland, where the Magdalene laundries were still being run, for single mothers. They were put away and left there, and their babies were taken away and adopted, and so that was still
Wow.
happening. That the last Magdalene laundry in Ireland shut down in 1998.
Mm,
So that was still happening, and so yeah, it was a really interesting experience when I look at it retrospectively.
mm. No,
Yeah.
for sure. And I'm kind of just imagining this isolation, the stigmatizing component, just like all of that. And yet you still found a way to, I mean, you're very, very like academically qualified and successful in your business and that kind of thing. You still managed to do all of that. So what do you think were some of the things that kind of helped you get through all of that? Like what are the what's the component or what's the secret sauce?
I don't know. Like, I often think about that because I left school when I was 14 with the belief system that I was stupid. And it wasn't because I was stupid, it was largely because of the archaic model of teaching didn't suit my learning style.
Mm,
And I left school with no qualifications,
mm,
and then went off to do waitressing, and then had Ashley, and realized quickly that actually working as a waitress every weekend, where my mum would support me and have Ashley, um, wasn't going to earn us enough money.
mm,
So when he was about 6 months old, I went to the Inverness College and got the equivalent of my O grades, as they called them back then. So I think it's your NCA here now. And that was the start of it. And then I was very interested in all things environment. So I went off and did my first diploma in environmental science. And then I went off and did massage. And then I did reflexology. And that's kind of got me, kind of piqued my interest in um, this complementary pathway. And then when I got to New Zealand at age 26, when we moved to Auckland, I did my undergraduate degree in complementary medicine, and I've not stopped since. But
mm.
I think I'm very passionate about what I do. I believe in freedom of choice in healthcare, so that's one of my motivating factors. Um, I did come across a reading where whatever you see your child is interested in at a young age, like nurture that, because that could be a passion of theirs. And I've always been passionate about mother nature, like in the garden. I was always, curious about, why do my eyebrows kind of taste salty? And I'd often ask questions about the body. I'd make perfume out of rose petals in jam jars and go round the doors selling for 10 pence. So when I think about it, I've always really been interested in that more natural side of life. But yeah, I'm just like, once you work out what it is you're passionate about, then you just want to learn more, right? Because I know you're a bit like that too. It's like, oh, like once you unpack things, you go, oh, but there's more, and
Yeah.
then more, and then it never feels like it's enough. And I think that's really been my motivation. And I think probably, like, I can intellectually and cognitively say that I'm worthy, but there's been experiences in early childhood, like with my parents separating, like I think that had a real impact on my core belief of my value and my worth. And I
Mm.
think that's a factor that also drives me, is that if I'm this or have this qualification or successful in this, then that will help me feel like I'm really valuable in the world. And
Mm.
so I like to bring value to others as well. I think I've chose a career where I have, I do that. I'm a big fundraiser. That's another thing that I'm really proud of. Yeah, like during the Christchurch earthquakes, I put together an event called Heal Christchurch, where we provided, if you were to put a dollar value on it with the number of practitioners, healthcare to the value of $250,000.
Mm.
And
That's amazing.
we brought in practitioners from around the globe. Like we had people come in from London, Australia, a couple from America, and then all around New Zealand to provide chiropractic care and a technique where it helps with emotions. And then in the hub of this, because we had the geodome, because we lost the town hall, so we had this geodome in the middle of Hagley Park. And in the kind of heart of the geodome, we had massage therapists, and we got the Salvation Army to um, sponsor food for the workers. And it was just a wonderful event. And then I've done a few I Am Hope events, raising money for people with depression, and then just currently in the process of organising an event with to fundraise for UNICEF for
Mm.
amputee children in Gaza.
Mm.
That really does rock my boat too. That doesn't feels effortless in a way for me to do those events.
But what's interesting about you, Sam, is you're not, despite all this interest in complementary medicine and like an alternative pathway outside of the traditional box of medicine, you're still a person so grounded in science.
Yes, yeah,
And that's kind of, because we usually think of complementary medicine as like woo woo. It's just all sort of, fairies and unicorns and that kind of stuff, and people wandering around with like their bare feet. It's not, and
yeah,
yet, and it's not actually that. Like there's a lot of passion in the science behind
yeah,
some of the work that you do. I'm
yeah,
curious about
yeah.
what's behind that.
Yeah, well, I I do come from a scientific background, and I pride myself in that, because unfortunately in my profession as a naturopath, because it's not a protected term, anybody can go off and study something for 5 days and call themselves a naturopath. Now I've got 4 years of undergraduate credentials, and then I've got a further 6 years of postgraduate study as well at university. So I do pride myself that I am, led that way in my clinical practice, which is why I use these 5 pillars for my lens of helping and supporting people on their journey to their more desirable health.
Mm.
And that would be like their nutrition, their biochemistry. I look at environment. For example, like I would look at Parkinson's, and there's the science there that glyphosates can be involved in these prion type diseases like Parkinson's disease. I use genetics, and then I use emotional health as well. And so, we're both studying the conversational model, okay, and there's a lot of research around the efficacy of the conversational model, and particularly for trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder. And we met doing our Hakomi, which is a somatic type of psychotherapy. And again, there's just this abundance of somatic therapy, how it impacts the brain, how it impacts the body. Like, there's so many things that can quantify and qualify things now. So I'm really mindful of that, but I like to also park that, because what I'm really interested in is, like, who is it that's sitting in front of me? And what do they bring? And so we have covered in a previous podcast around years and years of micro movements on the face. Like, you can read people's faces. It's not scientific, but that can tell you a lot of information, and whether we like it or not, we use our intuition all the time. We're sitting there, just working out what's happening here at an energetic level. So I use that as well. That's not scientific. So I come in with a scientific lens, but I'm grounded in my senses as well, I think.
But I sometimes wonder, I'm like you, a very curious person, and some of the latest studies that I've read on interoception and neuroception and limbic resonance, that kind of thing, is
Yes.
I think the science is almost catching up with what
Yeah.
we already know in some
Yeah.
fields in complementary medicine and psychology and psychotherapy. It's like
Yeah.
we've known for years that we're a system.
Yes.
But medicine is still catching up with it, because medicine is delivered in a very siloed, medical fields are very, very siloed, very, everyone's got their little box that they're in. And I think my big passion around educating people on, functional medicine and different types of practices in healthcare, and kind of being well as a human, is because I think in many ways pharmacology is failing us, and the traditional approaches to basically just throw a pill at a problem, it's failing us. And actually some of these other fields, it's interesting, like we both have a really good friend who's a general practitioner. In some ways, he comes to you and asks you questions about certain conditions, because there's a level at which medicine doesn't go into the depth that you go into as a functional medicine practitioner.
That's right. And when I was in Christchurch, living in Christchurch, like, I did work in a multidisciplinary clinic called The Clinic, which unfortunately we had lost our colleagues in the earthquake in there. And they would, those doctors have now obviously passed, but they would refer their clients to me because they saw the model in which I was working with. And I'm not a profitable organization by any means. I don't make money out of selling supplements, or it's my consultation that you pay for and that's it. So I'm a not-for-profit organization, but there's a lot of money to be made out of pharmaceuticals. And what I guess is an irritating point for me is that we're trying to put the model of many modalities into a medical paradigm model of randomized controlled trials. So you're looking for one cause and one effect. And so to do that, what you have to do is you have to truncate the systems away from each other. You have to split them. And the body doesn't work like that, and so you can't possibly expect that model of study to work with these modalities, because they weren't designed for that. The RCTs were designed for the medical model. And so you're trying to almost fit square pegs into round holes in a way. It just doesn't work. And so what we're seeing more and more of, which is what I draw on, is these longitudinal clinical studies. So we're looking for clinical outcomes. So we might go, well, that person has tried psychotherapy, that person has done trauma work with Adele, they've done some genetic profiling with me and some lifestyle stuff with me, and yeah, they've got MS, for example. And by trying all of these things, what's the outcome? So we're not interested in just one modality. We need to pull on several modalities to support the multifaceted system by which we live in, this shell in which we live in, to get good clinical outcomes. And that's what I'm interested in my clinic.
Yeah, 100%. And I think also I often have challenges when I read, because I read a lot of academic research in my profession as well. And I have a lot of challenges, particularly with the way that pharmaceutical and pharmacological studies and trials are done. It's almost like, well, the FDA or somebody comes along and says, right, what you guys got. And then the pharmaceutical company is funding the scientists to do the trial. They get the outcome that they want. And then the FDA looks at that to look at it. And they have to just trust and leap that nobody lied and that it is exactly what it says on the tin.
Yes.
So, for example, if you look at the kind of serotonin hypothesis, the fact that we all think that depression is caused by a lack of serotonin in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
Years and years and decades we've been thinking that. And yet there's this huge umbrella study in 2022 that shows that depression is not actually linked to that. It's a part of it, but it's not the whole story. And it's like, and that umbrella study covered about, it was, over 700 psychiatrists globally that actually looked at longitudinal clinical outcomes across time. And to me, it's sad that we don't have that as the new solution is actually it's a system.
Yeah.
The medical profession is still leaning on the old system because they don't have a new pill that actually just does it quickly.
That's right. And with all due respect, I think medicine does fabulous things. Like, we couldn't be here without them. But one of its limitations is that if you can't test for it, if you can't have a pill for it, and if you can't image it, it doesn't exist. Now, that's a big problem, okay? Because what happens now in, say, 10 years' time when we go, it was more than transglutamase that we were looking for to diagnose celiac disease. Now we know that there's this other marker. But what about all the people before or behind us that were told, no, you don't have celiac disease? Yeah. Oh, actually, you do. We got it wrong. And so we have to be mindful of its strengths, but also its weaknesses. And that goes for my own profession too. We have to be very mindful of both of those, okay? The pendulum, once it swings one way, it's got to swing the other way. That's how life moves all the time. But I just want to touch back on the serotonin hypothesis of that it was a serotonin deficiency. What we also know is that depression and anxiety can go hand in hand with each other. And we know that there can be issues with GABA receptors. We know that there can be issues with methylating. We know that the microbiome, for example, if you've got inflammation in the gut-brain axis, we know that through the metabolites of the bacteria, short-chain fatty acids, they send messages up through the vagal nerve. And the vagal nerve then sends through to the brainstem, which can then connect in with the limbic system of the brain. And that happens within minutes. And we've got inflammation in the gut, and often a comorbid depression or anxiety can go with that. Like we often see that in people with irritable bowel, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, for example. How that affects mental health. But if we go back to the serotonin, so St. John's wort was the complementary to SSRIs or SSNIs. And, medicine would say, oh, no, that doesn't work.
It's nonsense. Yeah.
Nonsense. Yeah. But actually what we do know, and this was 20 years ago this was happening, and I was early into my profession then, but what we did know was it's something to do with, there's many constituents in St. John's wort. St. John's wort is by and large an antioxidant and an anti-inflammatory. And hyperforin we know in particular is particularly, and hypericin, particularly good for depression. And it's because they're very powerful anti-inflammatories. And what we do know about depression now is that it can be a inflammation in the body that can cause depression. So by taking St. John's wort, may also have an impact on the microbiome. I haven't really looked at that research, but maybe it was having an anti-inflammatory effect on the microbiome, which was helping regulate mood. But we were told, no, that's just nonsense. But actually, there's more and more herbal research coming out, and not in vitro, not in rodents, but in actual human clinical trials showing the efficacy of herbal medicine. It's amazing.
And I kind of feel like we're going to see an absolute explosion of science backing up age-old things and remedies that people have been doing in the next 20 years. I think it's almost, I can see it already starting to happen. You can see, like, even you look at social media and people are like, when you drink your water, have like a little bit of Celtic sea salt in there. And like, if you do this, and that's good for your rehydration. And it's like, people, like, the kind of functional medicine specialists knew about this like 20 years ago. It's like it's a new thing. And it's just like, no, it's just suddenly coming into the realm of our understanding and knowledge now. And I think patients and clients and patients and human beings, we're tired of being talked down to.
Yes.
At the end of the day, we are now actually interested in advocating for our own health and not abdicating to medical specialists anymore. And I think, I work with medical specialists all the time, and they are, to your point, very, very important for the systems. But they're an important team member of the system. They shouldn't be the silo of the system.
And I think, like my husband John, he's a chiropractor, and he talks about the next doctor. The next doctor needs to have, needs to be the chiropractor, needs to be the naturopath, needs to be the therapist, needs to be the medical, whatever that part is. And that is the new age doctor. Like we need to take care of all the parts, all the systems, rather than truncating the person's story to just be the bowel for the gastroenterologist. And that's important. But what has happened to this person, and what we do know, particularly for people with Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, inflammatory bowel disease is the umbrella term for those two conditions, is that they have had some form of emotional stress happen to them. And I can also talk to that because I do have a history of inflammatory bowel disease. So I know what was happening prior to me presenting with inflammatory bowel disease. And so my disposition is stress. I do have to manage my own anxiety. That's one of my isms. It's almost a superpower as well, in a way. But so, you can't truncate me just to a large bowel. Like, what else was happening for me around that time? And that's another conversation, I'm sure, for another time. But we have to look at us as whole.
Whole humans, whole people.
Whole humans. But anyway, that's been my journey from, woe to go so far. And it's been good. I'm enjoying it.
Well, I'm sure we're going to delve into deeper levels of your story in another episode. But thanks, Sam, for sharing.
Thank
awesome.
you.
All right. Till next time. Bye.
Bye.
The information shared on the Naked Insights podcast is for educational and information purposes only, and is not intended as a substitute for professional therapy or counseling. While we aim to provide helpful and accurate insights, individual experiences may vary. If you're experiencing trauma, mental health issues, or distress, please seek guidance from a qualified professional. The views expressed by us as the hosts are our own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions or positions of any affiliated organizations.